Hello and welcome to part 3 of my sort of hybrid acoustic guitar build made out of reclaimed materials, mostly reclaimed hollow core doors. And I definitely recommend watching parts 1 and 2 if you haven't seen them, where I show about making a jig and how I put together this box, this body of this guitar. And we're picking up here where I'm going to build the neck and put it all together. But first, I didn't have the binding on in the last video, and I decided to put a binding on because it does protect the edge, although I really don't like the look of it. I like the look of just the wood together, but the seams weren't as pretty as I wanted them to be, and this is a great way to sort of hide and cover that and make the guitar look like it has more value by just doing this. And just simply some plastic binding that I bought online, some CA glue, and a matter of using a specialized router bit to just route a very shallow groove along both sides of the instrument, and a little bit of patience and a lot of masking tape. There is a bit of a sharp turn there around that point that was a little bit tricky putting the binding on, and I will probably need to do something about that in the future to make it look a little better. I had to go back and sort of fix that spot. I think maybe even just putting a slight kerf in the binding right there on the inside, and it'll help it hold to that corner better. So I made the route just a little bit shallower than the actual binding is, so I could bring the level of the binding down to the body instead of having it like not be deep enough. It's a pretty common thing to do, and use some basic hand tools and a razor blade to sort of clean it all up, get the super glue and masking tape off of it. And it came out pretty good. I've only done binding a couple times in the past. I don't have a lot of experience with this, and so there's a dramatic improvement already between my first and second one. But while I was doing all that, I had my trusty employee, my avid CNC, carving out guitar necks. And so this is a pretty basic guitar neck design of mine that I modified to fit this instrument. And you'll notice that it's a bolt-on neck. And I decided to do more like an electric guitar kind of neck on these instruments because it's something I wanted to try. And I'm not sure how it's going to affect it, but I also thought it'd be cool, instead of just screwing it on like a Stratocaster, to actually put some threaded inserts in there and bolt it on. Now, I think in the future I'll add a fifth bolt in the middle in a little metal plate so I can make it like an angle adjustment. I think that would be a nice added bonus to put on this guitar. But again, these are prototypes, and that's what I'm learning as I go. I had to do a little bit of hand drilling as I'm figuring it all out, but this might be moving forward how I do all my bolt-on necks. Works really well. And then I used this little template. I found my mark and kind of measured out to make sure everything is looking like it's going to work right. And so far all of this is lining up correctly. And I can use this tool designed by my buddy over at SDM Custom to check my sort of center and whatnot. So we line that up with our nut, in this case 0 fret. And clamp it on, and then we'll line this whole thing up. We're supposed to be centered on the neck, and we can see it looks like my holes are a little bit off center, which I'm not surprised by, so I probably won't end up being able to use those. We're going to end up more like that. But now this one, on the other hand, it looks like I got it pretty much perfect, which is real exciting. Because, that was the prototype one, and I was experimenting with ways to do it, and that's a sign that my experimentations were paying off and that worked right. So I'm feeling even more optimistic about this one now. If you remember from part 2 of the series, when I cut out the top and the laser, I also cut out the holes where the bridge would go. I thought it would save me some trouble lining it up. But then I realized when I was gluing it together that if the top was just a little bit crooked before I sort of fit it all, that would really be a problem. And so in the future, I just won't put the holes in the body. I'll put it together and then use my bridge plate to line everything up. And here I'm using my center square and some scraps from the rivets that the stems from when I made the center squares that I sell at squaretools.com. I save them all, and I use those for side markers. I have a nice little metal side marker in there. You'll notice that my center square tool, when it's fully closed, is wider than the top skinny frets on the guitar neck, so I can't really line it up on the fret lines to find the exact center, so I do have to do a little bit of eyeballing on a couple of the top frets, but it definitely does help you see the center on those skinnier frets, and then for the wider frets it works perfectly. And speaking of frets, now it's time to put them into the fingerboard, and I'm using my drill press as a arbor press because I don't have an arbor press. A bunch of years ago, I got a whole bunch of side mount guitar tuners that were leftovers from a local guitar factory that went out of business. A friend of mine's father that worked there, Dylan's father, had flats of them, and so I've thought this would be a great opportunity to use them, and I've been designing some headstocks around these side mount tuners that are really nice. And I have that little jig I made, so it helps me align the holes, because I can't do that in the CNC file. I have to do it by hand. And you'll notice I drill a smaller hole first to go through the center of the head, and then I go back and do a slightly wider hole on the outside, and this time I back it up to avoid tear out. So that way the tuner head, the fat part fits in and locks into place there, and then the skinny part fits in pretty tightly into the hole inside the head. It's just like a little sort of support there. If you were to look at it close up, it would make some sense. And lately I have been running my CNC files a little bit differently, so they don't actually cut the finished edge on my necks, and I fit those in because I always have to sand them in a little bit anyways, and with a hand rasp I can do it very quickly, and I don't run the risk of going in too far. It just seems to work a little better. There's always a lot of hand work, of course. And there's that center square in action again as I align where I'm going to put the logo. So I went on Instagram a little while back and looked for some name suggestions for this model, and I had some great suggestions. If you follow me on Instagram in my stories, you can be apprised of this stuff in real time. But I ended up naming it after my friend Z, who is from Singapore and has been visiting in America. He's probably back in Singapore by now, by the time this video comes out. And he had just happened to be in the shop that day hanging out with me, and so I named him after him. I thought it'd be a nice tribute to him and his time here in the U.S. Now, I'm sure most of you have seen acoustic guitars where those bridges have just peeled right up off the body, and one of the ways I thought to combat this is instead of just using a wooden dowel to glue it in, and instead of just gluing it on, I put these metal aluminum threaded inserts. I shoved them inside the body through the plate, line up my bridge and screw them down, and then clamp and let the glue do its work. And so now if the glue fails, the screws will hold it, and vice versa. I think it'll just help take a lot of pressure off that glue and keep the bridge plate from lifting up in a couple of years, which happens so often. And there's that Go board, the Go deck that I made. You'll remember from the video last week how there's a plate that I put under the Go deck, and one of the reasons I built it that way was so when I had the full guitar I could fit it under without that plate. For finish, I like to keep things natural, especially on acoustics. It made sense to me to not cover it all in plasticky, glossy stuff, so I did a Rubio monocoat finish, hand rubbed, and I used some corian from an old countertop to carve out my nut and bridge. And then, of course, I had to just add a slight taper to the pre-drilled holes that I had for my acoustic guitar pegs, and the rest is pretty much a pretty generic acoustic guitar setup. But the other thing that I'm able to do, since I have this bolt-on neck, is I was able to actually go and adjust. I ended up shimming this guitar, the cedar top one. I added a slight shim to the neck, and I was able to get the action a little bit better and more playable. And then the other one, it just all lined up perfect, and I didn't have to. But so it's, another advantage of having that bolt-on neck. It makes setting it up and making it play way easier. So let's have a listen. Let's have a little bit of fun. I just finished putting together these two guitars that I've been working on for this video series, the closet door, all closet door one. And then the closet door and cedar fence one. And I also brought this is my guitar from back when I used to play. This is an Ibanez with a maple back and spruce top. This is just my guitar that I've had for a long time. And I strung them all up with the same strings, D'Addario lights. They all have fresh strings on them. And I have this MXL 4000 large diaphragm microphone plugged into my Tascam mini recorder right now. And we're going to just sort of A-B all three of these guitars. And just sort of see what they sound like. I'll just play a couple open chords on each one, and then maybe we'll do a little bit of noodling on each one. And just a little unscientific comparison of what they sound like. little fuller in the room, a little bit muddier too, not quite as sharp. Very similar to the second one. Here, let's do something else. I don't think it has as much fullness and color as the other two, but it's actually like holding its own, you know? I'm sure that the ebony fingerboard helps a little bit too, but let's do like overall, I'm really pleased with how these came out, all things considered. You know, it's really, like I've said, I've dabbled with making some acoustic instruments a little bit in the past, like these little guitars and some sort of very experimental things, but this is my first attempt at really making like a proper acoustic, and they actually sound pretty good, so I'm going to hang on to them for a little while and sort of beat the heck out of them and make sure they're going to stand up. And you know, there's all these little flaws, like some of these problems I ran into with using the closet doors and fixing the edges and stuff. But now that I've made the two, you can see dramatic improvements in solving some of these problems between the first and the second. And so the third, I think I could really make a pretty clean looking guitar, you know, using these materials. And it seems to sound pretty good. One idea I have is to like call up all my friends and get like all the acoustic guitars I can get, and maybe sit down and do like another little A/B mixing my guitars in, and do a big acoustic guitar shootout. I'd love to hear your thoughts on that. And then the other thing I was thinking about doing is, you know, if these hold up as well as I expect they should, the cedar top one, I'm probably gonna make available. And I was thinking maybe it'd be fun to do like in the past I've done like auctions, but I thought it might be fun to do like a raffle and maybe do like a 50-50, like, you know, half goes to a charity or something like that. I'd love to hear your ideas on that too. So that's something to look for in the future as well. But for now, I think I'm gonna take the day off and sit and noodle around on the acoustics because it's a lot of fun, man. So thank you very much for watching. I hope you've enjoyed this journey. If you didn't see the first two videos, you can see them and you can learn a little bit more about how these are made and how they're a little bit different than what's out there. And you know, like, this is like, I'm really excited that I managed to get this done before the end of the year, because it was one of my goals to start developing an acoustic guitar in this year. And so I think next year I should have a product. I'm really excited about that. All right, thanks a lot for watching, and be good. I actually really like the all door one. I think the next one I make will be all door, you know? Maybe.